Why won't sharks attack lawyers? Professional courtesy. In 2015, Avo asked a few thousand Americans to rate their respect for people in a given list of professions. The 12 types of professionals they asked about, the only two that fared worse than lawyers were car salesmen and politicians. Where's this lawyer hate coming from? Is it stereotypes of lawyers we see on TV? Misplaced anger from clients based on a lack of understanding about the nature of legal proceedings? Is it the unknown cost, fears of overcharging? I'm going to get charged $175 for a 10-minute phone call. It's not worth it. A lot of this is perpetuated by people who've never been in a situation where they needed legal help. The previously mentioned Avo survey also backs this up. When asking people who had hired a lawyer in the past 2 years, 55% of them had a positive impression of attorneys, and 34% were neutral. Those numbers may not be spectacular, but they're encouraging. Not everyone hates lawyers, and people who hired an attorney had a much more favorable impression than those that only know lawyers from what they see on Shark Week. Maybe by breaking down the causes of the negative public perception of lawyers, true or untrue as they may be, we can sink some of those shark lawyer jokes before they take a bite out of the profession. Is there an opportunity for lawyers themselves to nudge the needle of public perception? That's the wind we're sailing under. So let's raise the anchor and cast off. Let's go.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by ConsultWebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that holds down the fort for you while you step out for just a quick minute to go to Karen's. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in personal and professional developments. I am Jake Sanders, veteran advertising adventure expedition guide. And with me, as always, is the Sherpa of search engines, Paul Julius. Paul, how goes our explorations thus far today?
Air's getting a little thin up here, but slow and steady progress.
I could feel it. As long as you get my Keurig up there to Base Camp 2 so I can enjoy a hot cuppa.
Really long extension cord.
Yeah, and then later, bury me on the top of the mountain. And actually, don't bury me, just leave my body there.
Well, holding on to your Keurig.
Buried on a frozen mountain with his Keurig. What? Besides this, really important aside on mountaineering, what's on the show today?
On the show, we talk about the public perception of lawyers with an article from the Huffington Post. Then we dive into legal consumer insights with Nika Khabiri. And then we place our guests under the bright lights of 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The article today is from the Huffington Post. It's by Mark Baer. It's called Aggressive Lawyering is Counterproductive. Paul, you found this article. Why don't you give us a little drop?
So the overall thing here is there's this idea, and I think it's brought out best in they say like TV movies, stuff like that, where these angry yelling lawyers, confrontational stuff like that. But what I think this article outlines pretty well is that there's a difference between being assertive and zealous and aggressive. And many lawyers, either due to their perception of what clients are looking for or what they think lawyers need to do to be successful, skip those first two and go right to aggressive. And that can put them at odds with judges, with opposing counsel, with the actual client, what the client actually needs and the outcomes they can get. So, aggressive, it's a really good article. It outlines, a lot of the different ways that aggression, from the outset, can cause you some problems and in a lot of ways is, happens because of misperceptions from the lawyers themselves. So that's kind of the summary.
Well, and I thought it was interesting that it's actually, we talk about this a lot, taxonomy and what a word actually means. And in the legal profession, it's interesting that there's a word and it's been taken so many different ways by so many different lawyers who are traditionally thought to be the arbiters of understanding the written language and helping us understand it. It seems odd that we're fighting over what it means to be aggressive, when actually you look up the definition, it's like ready to attack, like actually physically harm someone. When assertiveness, zealous representation, very shrewd judge of character, those things could be under the title of aggressive, but doesn't necessarily reach to it. So I think that's one of the more interesting aspects. And we go into it later in the interview with Nika, and I got into it with some folks on Twitter, just sort of walked into a thread talking about this same thing. And all the lawyers were like, it's so toxic. Who taught us to be aggressive? Like, who in their right mind teaches lawyers to be aggressive? And my question was, who indeed? Because it's not in law school. It's public culture, it's movies, and it's also what lawyers do, marketing wise and advertising wise, and how they build their businesses and how they do public relations. So
we've talked about it before. I know in your prior role with the law firm, you said a lot of people, they felt they were wronged. And they feel like this big company is just starting to mess with them and do them wrong.
Yeah,
so I want, if you have someone, if your marketing message is, I will fight for you. Well, isn't this, and I'm just kind of playing the other side of the coin here, I guess, but isn't this just the distillation of that? Just, now not only am I going to fight for you, I'm going to attack. I'm going right off, from the get-go.
Right. And Law and Order, I mean, what makes for good TV doesn't necessarily make for compelling lawyering. In real life, are all of you going to be like Atticus Finch? No, but not all of us are going to be like my cousin Vinny. Like there's somewhere in between is where you're supposed to carve out a niche for your legal career.
But that's where most people get their perception of lawyers. And it seems like even lawyers get their perception of lawyers from that.
And that's what I'm saying. Before you were a lawyer, you were a normal person who put on pants like everyone else. Or you didn't wear pants. So you just had a mono pant, which is, I think, a skirt. But anyway, before you were a lawyer, you had perceptions of things. So I just thought it was funny to walk into a Twitter thread of lawyers being like, who taught us to be aggressive? It's the worst. You say, well, are you aggressive? You aren't? Well, then don't worry about it and do what you can to right the public perception through your advocacy in the way you choose to market and advertise yourself in the public sector, because that's important, folks. So Nika drops into it in our interview later. She talks about the real problem is with aggressive or public perception of lawyers is that it ends up being an economic decision of supply and demand, that it isn't all about how you feel about your perception. It's actually, what does the client need? Do they need someone aggressive? Do they need someone understated? And by practice area, sometimes you can be aggressive in divorce or criminal cases, but you don't need to be aggressive if you're just looking up IP law in LexisNexis. Like you don't need to show
a business.
Just punch. Takes
he
Westlaw.
Incorporated the hell out of us.
He takes LexisNexis into the other room and just roughs it up. Just punches that stupid face of LexisNexis.
Well, there's a line in the article here. It's one of the points that, and I think you just nailed it. What clients need, and it says, good lawyers don't just try cases. Good lawyers try to resolve cases.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're talking about.
Super beautiful. And Nika, who worked at Avo, who has been talking to lawyers for years about consumer insights, has some hot potatoes that we are going to pass back and forth in the interview. So let's get to it.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
We really have a relationship with ConsultWebs that goes beyond simple business-to-business marketing. We have grown up with them as a company. They were there for us when we started. We were there for them when they started.
So I think that we were ConsultWeb's first personal injury client 15 or 16 years ago.
I've been working with them directly for 10 years now, and they've always been a fantastic partner.
It's vitally important to us that when somebody says you should hire Bellick and Fox, and they go to the Bellick and Fox website, they're going to go beyond the website and contact us.
They understand storytelling, they understand technology, they understand a website isn't just text on a page, it's how you create an expectation for what that means to work with us.
When we get a case, they are very excited in a really genuine way that I think reflects the fact that they sort of view their success tied to ours. So that's why we've continued to use them.
I've never had anything but praise for how they've been able to market our website.
Go to consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now for a Lawsome interview.
Nika Khabiri is vice president at Lux Insights, a market research agency that helps companies grow and shape their brands. Nika received her PhD and master's in sociology at the University of Washington and also has a JD from the University of Texas Law School. With a decade of experience leading research projects for clients in the legal, retail, tech, and nonprofit sectors, including a stop as director of strategic insights at Avo, Nika brings a unique combination of market research expertise and rigorous academic training to her work. Nika, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your research into market behaviors and stuff, specifically for legal consumers, what's been the findings from your research? Like, how do legal consumers want, or how do they perceive lawyers? Or is it all bad news for public perception and lawyers? Or are lawyers doomed to forever be the punchline of a mean-spirited joke?
Lawyers will probably always be the punchline of some joke or another, simply because it's just too easy.
Sure.
But that's not dooming them. It's not everything that they mean to consumers. They're more than that. And I think the most interesting thing that's come out of the research that I've done is that when you ask just the general population what they think about lawyers, they rate them kind of low. And I know Pew Research has done some studies on this where, lawyers are at the bottom of the list as far as whether they contribute to society or to society's well-being. I know at Avo, there was a study that we did where lawyers sort of rank right there with car salesmen and taxi drivers as far as, how respected they are. But then when you think, so that's where, you can see a lot of the jokes coming around. But when you start talking to people who actually have legal issues, in other words, people whose opinions really kind of matter more because they're in it, right? And it could be anybody at any time. That's the thing. When you talk to them, way more of them find lawyers to be absolutely necessary. So about 61%, which is almost 2 in 3 people who have legal issues, will tell you that lawyers are absolutely necessary, which is very different than the kind of stuff you get when you hear about, lawyers being totally useless or irrelevant or a problem. So it's just something about getting that thing triggered, having that issue. You've heard that saying, everybody hates lawyers until they need one. It's kind of true.
And that's interesting that you say that the people, you need one and that's when you love them. But I mean, what do you think are the main contributing factors that determine how people think of lawyers? Like, is it these TV ads? I mean, why? What's with the hate?
Yeah. And, it's kind of, and, we should get to that, the TV ads and the TV personas of lawyers a little bit. When it comes to what people want in a lawyer or why they like or dislike lawyers, it comes down to like the human empathy or compassion part of it. I think a lot of people see in the research that I've done, the people that I've talked to, they see lawyers as sort of kind of leaning towards seeing their profession as a business, which is what it is. And to a lawyer, from a lawyer's perspective, they're public servants to a large extent, but they're also business owners and they're just doing a job. But unlike most, like, say, other jobs jobs I do or jobs that other people in other industries do, their clients are going through a lot of stuff. And I've written a lot about, the stress they go through and the anxiety that they deal with. And they actually really, really need lawyers in high stakes situations. And so when they go to a lawyer and the lawyer doesn't seem to treat their case with the kind of compassion or empathy or responsiveness that they expect, they tend to have a lower perception of lawyers overall. And it also kind of impacts the trustworthiness. So if you are an attorney who doesn't seem to really listen much or ask the right questions, doesn't seem to really care that much, it's kind of harder for consumers to trust you because they don't seem to feel like you know them. I think that's also why, for the most part, people who work with lawyers have more positive perceptions of them, because it seems that lawyers are a lot less, perhaps, cold and distant than people sort of assume. But there's still a long way to go.
Going back to a Twitter thread I was on recently, a lot of lawyers lament the fact that aggression is sort of lauded as a necessary characteristic for getting good legal advice done, or, you need someone who's aggressive. And I'm on two different sides of this, and I'm wondering if there is a necessary component to lawyers aggressively advocating for their clients, but then also, what's your thought on client research stuff? I mean, do the clients want an aggressive lawyer? And then do lawyers just feel bad because they're like, I don't want to be aggressive, and then they just complain about other lawyers and the public perception? Just kind of talk about aggression real fast, because I think it's good or bad, or I just feel on the fence, and I know you got some insights.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting topic for me, because I went to law school back in the day in Texas when like Rambo style litigation was like the thing. And so some of the role models that we were supposed to look up to were people who were really not just aggressive, but just rude and used really kind of unsavory tactics that got the job done. And I also always thought, like, is this really necessary? I mean, aren't we kind of reducing ourselves to just children who are throwing tantrums? But
right.
But the answer, the real answer is that it honestly, and this is the worst answer anybody ever wants to hear, is that it depends. Because it depends in part. I mean, it's never all one or the other, right? It depends in part on practice area, for instance. So if you have if you're going through a divorce, it's going to be really contentious. You might want a divorce attorney that's willing to fight for you somewhat aggressively in order to get what you want. But if you're trying to complete a will or set up a trust or perhaps get, a green card, I don't, to what extent does aggression really matter? I'm not really sure. So it kind of depends on that. But also different people want different types of attorneys. And for instance, I talked to a woman who was going through a divorce, and she said that one of the primary considerations that she had when she was like interviewing and shopping around for attorneys is just how empathetic they would be to her point of view, because she really needed somebody to understand what she was going through. And she actually chose one lawyer over another because the other attorney was very much into like the strategy and the game plan and the war plan, and she just wasn't into that. But you talk to somebody else in the same situation, and they're going to want that. So, and this is kind of a theme that I'll come back to over and over when I talk to attorneys, is you really need to just not assume that all consumers are the same, or that you can read somebody when they walk through the door. Excuse me. You really have to kind of feel them out and ask, but also understand what people in your practice area are looking for.
Let's talk about a little bit about advertising really fast.
Sure.
Display advertisements, social media stuff, law firms updating their social media posts, review sites. Digital landscape plays a part in the perception of lawyers. How do you think lawyers can elevate? Do you think that they're doing a good job by maintaining that public perception on digital? Is there some way? What's your advice for that kind of market research advice for lawyers if they're trying to get to public perception through advertising? What's holding them back, and what could actually help them?
Yeah. So the thing about the digital landscape that we all know about is that it's really noisy. There's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of information, and a lot of people are trying to talk at you at the same time. And so it doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or if you're a granola bar company or if you make, running shoes. If you want people to hear you out in the digital landscape, you have to sort of stand out. And one really, really important component of that is relevance. You really have to be relevant. So if I'm not a runner, anything I see on the digital space about running shoes is probably not going to register with me. It's not going to stick with me, right? The thing about lawyers or the legal space is that you never really know who is going to need a lawyer at any given time. at any given time who's going to want glitter lipstick or glitter lip gloss. It's probably 13-year-old girls, but you don't really know, as far as legal goes, like who to target to who's going to find your message the most relevant. So it's really challenging for lawyers to get it right, but they do need to kind of find a way to make that relevant stick and to be interesting to a larger population, or maybe a little bit more targeted population that they know will come to them. So for instance, if you're a wills or estates attorney, you probably don't want to be out on the digital space with material or content that's going to maybe be interesting to millennials, because they're not as likely to get a will as older Americans. So the thing about the relevance factor is that lawyers don't necessarily always have conversations in the digital space about things that are non-legal, but things that are non-legal, but that skirt up against the law, right? So for instance, family is a really important topic for a lot of people. It's related to divorce. It could be related to immigration. You could have a family business. There are a lot of different areas in the law that are related to this social thing called the family. So I think if lawyers want to be more relevant to talk about those personal social things that bump up against the legal stuff, that would make their chances of being heard or swaying public perception a little bit easier. But I don't think that a lot of lawyers do that. I think they kind of stick into to talking about, the legal stuff. And it's really kind of hard to it's like hitting a moving target. Like, who am I talking to? Who out there is actually going to need this kind of service? If that makes a lot of sense. So not so sure how effective lawyers are in the digital space, even with review sites or their social media personas, like not sure how effective that is at improving perception. What really seems to sway perception a lot more is the way that the news media or even the entertainment industry portrays lawyers, because that's kind of, they do so in a way that is more broad and more interesting to a larger population. And a lot of times it can be pretty negative.
Oh my God. Well, so speaking of, I was watching Primal Fear the other day with Richard Gere.
Right.
Yo, I cannot believe how much clothes we used to wear. Like, we had so many clothes, like the pants are so baggy. And
right.
but then I think, like, lawyers don't wear that many clothes. But that's not the point. But he wanted to close the case. So he was really all about his ego. And then in the end, it undid him. And there was this, it's just fantastic.
Right.
I mean,
right.
But Lincoln Lawyer, I love Lincoln Lawyer. Love that movie.
Right.
So there's a good way to do it. And yeah, ain't nobody mad at To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, like, come on.
No.
That's a good one, So anyway, Paul, go ahead. You had a question, man.
Sorry, I spaced out what you were saying about the clothes there.
It's not about Primal Fear. Yeah, it was about big pants.
It started off about pants, and then I just forgot. I'm sorry. No,
pants and shoulder pads too.
Yes.
Don't.
Nika knows what's up.
Man, we could do a whole show on shoulder pads. Jeez.
Yeah, please no.
Well, we're trying to be relevant. We want to be relevant. Yeah, we want to be relevant.
Well, no, what I was thinking about was that you mentioned earlier about empathy and something that it seems like it comes up again, like what you were talking about with the social media. And we see this too from our side, where a lawyer will have a Facebook page and all they ever post is, in an accident, call me. If you've been hurt in a car wreck, call me. And it's like, that's not interaction. That's just being in your face about me and what I do. And so I was kind of curious, like, do you think lawyers truly understand the nature of their relationship with the client from the client's perspective? Especially speaking for the lawyers out there who see their jobs as more of a transaction versus a service. Like, I mean, do they care if they get the job done? Like, why would client-side empathy make a difference?
Yeah, I think that a lot of lawyers do think that if they just get the job done, then they're doing a good job. And part of getting the job done has to do with understanding the law and maybe even impressing clients about their understanding of the law. When really at the end of the day, there's much more to it, much more to what clients need. And I don't think a lot of lawyers really get it because, and nothing against, lawyers in particular, they're just not talking to everyone who has a legal issue. If you think about the people that they are talking to and getting insights from, it's their clients. And yet, about 40 to 50% of the U.S. population who has a legal issue, they're using a lawyer. The rest are not. So you have over half of people who have some legal issue who are fumbling through their divorce on their own, or defending themselves in court against a criminal misdemeanor, or filing their own paperwork to get their green card, or what have you. And those opinions of those people, especially among those people who don't really want to hire a lawyer, really matter. Because if lawyers could really talk to them and understand why those people are really not into hiring, then they would be much more empowered to figure out how to woo those people over and have them hire. But they just, lawyers don't have easy access to them, and they usually just talk to their clients. But that's why somebody like me comes in, is because research can actually get at those people and talk to those people, and understand, from the research that I've done, it's really clear that a lot of people don't want to hire a lawyer because they're afraid of losing control of their case. And that's a real kind of important thing to them. They don't want to relinquish all that control to somebody else. So, one way to adjust, for instance, is for lawyers to sort of not take so much control, maybe be more collaborative and share. And that's something I talked about at a lawyer in I think it was 2016 in Lawyeronomics. That this is something that, because lawyers don't talk to the right people, they don't often understand what people need, and they can't really grow their business the right way. But also, I think lawyers don't get it because they don't ask their clients for feedback. They just sort of make assumptions, like you said, that they're a service, they're trying to conduct a transaction, they have to get some paperwork done, or however they think about their jobs day to day. But it's each client that comes in, it's a very unusual, stressful situation for them. And lawyers are, they're just so in their jobs that they don't really think about that. And they don't necessarily ask, what kind of relationship would you want? How involved would you want to be? How regularly would you like updates? What can I do to make you feel more comfortable about trusting me? I mean, it's all this define the relationship sort of stuff that you do with a friendship or any other, business partner, but you don't really, lawyers don't really ask for that feedback.
Wow.
Which is kind of unfortunate.
Well, and that it's all right there. It's all just right there. And you just need to ask people the right questions. So here's my question. Assuming that there are contributing factors to the perception of lawyers that are controllable, what's something that our listeners, lawyers out there right now in the trenches, what can they do to make sure that they're part of the solution and not part of the problem?
So I think about three things that really could matter. First is to really care about each case, which is, it's exhausting a lot of times. But it doesn't really have to be the case that you have to care about each person like they're your best friend or family member. It's really just about finding something in the case that you care about, whether it's even a legal issue or something that you can get excited about. Because if you can find that will to care and to bring that energy into the case, it comes across, and consumers see that. They really want legal consumers really want a lawyer that's committed to doing a good job for them. And when you find something in that case that you really want to really, sink your teeth into, that's how it comes across, that you're committed to doing a good job for them. So if you, as a lawyer, if you start finding yourself slipping into complacency, or, it's another day at the office, then you might want to just either check yourself and figure out what's going on there, or brace yourself for maybe not doing so well in earning referrals. And the second thing, which is related, is to listen. I mean, I've had talked to, lawyers as research subjects, but also, gone to lawyers for my own legal issues for various things. And the one thing that always strikes me as interesting is how much they want to talk to me about what they're feeling and thinking about the law, and how unjust it is, or how unfair it is, or how difficult it is to argue this or that, and how very few of them really just sit there quietly and let me to talk and ask the right questions. And that's one way to even show you care without even exerting a lot of energy, is just to sit quietly and listen to, and I know a lot of lawyers have told me, oh, well, then I turn into a therapist, and, I don't want to sit there and hear all their problems, but, you are you are service, but you're in customer service too. And oftentimes all people need is to kind of vent for just a few minutes to get it off their chest so that they can move on to the legal stuff. It's not like you don't need to be a therapist. You don't need to see them for an hour every week to talk about their feelings.
And charge them appropriately too.
Well, that's the thing too. If that's how they want to spend their time with you, if that's what they find valuable, let them make that call.
Sure.
And then the third thing is to respond really quickly to emails, phone calls, etc. And by quickly, I mean within the day. It's, time and again, legal consumers have said that is a really, really important component of good lawyering, is just to really respond quickly. So, they don't like to be left hanging. They're under a lot of stress, etc. So as you can see, none of this has to do with read more case law, or have a better digital ad, or make sure your TV ad is this or that. It's just really about the human component, because the legal space is full of human beings who have real human needs, and they're looking to you for help in that.
I think it's interesting that there's these, we were talking earlier about people who don't get lawyers and how their information is important. It's almost like there's this weird kind of closed loop. There's this perception, like maybe some of them aren't getting lawyers because they're like, oh, this guy's going to rip me off, or
right.
it's going to be scary. Like, look at that website of this dude with his arms folded in front of a bookcase. Like, I don't want to talk to that guy, so I never get the help I need. But it's all because of the perception, Totally.
And it's also, I think it's a lack of a lot of it is a lack of understanding about what lawyers really do, which is, I'm not so sure that, we should put it on the average person to kind of, have empathy for lawyers that way. But there is an opportunity for them to understand what lawyers actually do for a living. So for instance, you see a lot of times lawyers on television representing criminal defendants who are just abhorrent, right? Like serial killers or what have you. So, and you think to yourself, oh, what a terrible person to defend such a terrible person. And lawyers must really have no morals or ethics because they're trying to get this murderer off or whatever. But there's really no understanding of why that lawyer is there and how important it is for a criminal defendant to have representation, because, it's anybody could have the finger pointed at them and they deserve legal representation. So it's just a cornerstone of rule of law. And I think a lot of people just kind of don't really think about that. So if they understood that, to some extent, lawyers are trying to help you, but it also is a job and they're fulfilling a role and they're trying to actually do the right thing in a lot of ways. That perspective could, if only people could see that, it could kind of change a lot of things.
It's not like that. You know what I mean? Like on TV, It's not like that. Like in general, you're familiar with and probably friendly with opposing counsel.
Totally.
Stuff takes a lot longer. Nobody's yelling.
Right. Right. It's really kind of routine. It's just rote. It's just, it's like any other job. It's any other job. And then you have Law and Order and all these other TV shows that make it sound like it's something else, that there is some sort of a moral component to every little decision a lawyer makes. Well, there's no, I don't think that's really fair.
100%
It's
true.
not a fair representation.
Right.
Yeah.
We could keep going, but we can't. So how can people learn more about you, Nika?
Right. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My profile should be there. Feel free to send me a message if you are curious about learning more about legal consumers and how you can grow your practice by understanding them better. And also, you can go to luxinsights.com. That's luxinsights.com to learn more about what market research can do to help you.
5 questions we ask everyone.
5 questions we ask everyone. Here we go.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Number 1, what was the last book you read?
The last book, it was The 4 Agreements, actually. And I read it in like a couple hours.
Nice. Number 2, what is your favorite place?
My favorite place, I don't know. I think it's in my head, to be honest. If I can, it's kind of weird, but if I can play around with ideas and be, stretched intellectually, it doesn't really matter where I am.
What a great answer.
Great answer.
Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
Oh, so the New York Times Daily, and I love the Business Daily, which is a podcast that the BBC does. I'm really into podcasts like that, TED, anything that could help me learn. As far as blogging goes, I don't really read a lot of blogs as much as I read just news, like Forbes or Entrepreneur Inc. or stuff like that.
Nice. Okay. Number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
One condiment?
One condiment.
Oh, I don't know why I'm saying this, but I think it would have to be blue cheese dressing. Yeah, I think it'd have to be blue cheese dressing.
Right on. All right. We made it to the end here. Number 5, after a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
This is so embarrassing. I just literally zone out in front of the TV because I think I spend so much of my day using my head. And then by the end of the day, I'm so tired that I just want to watch something silly and just zone out.
No, that's perfect.
It's terrible.
No,
It's not terrible. It's great.
Yeah, you've earned it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. That's it. We made it to the end.
Thanks. That was fun.
For show notes, links, and info, follow us on Twitter or Facebook, or go to www.consultwebs.com/lawsomepodcast. Be sure to leave us a review and ratings on iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.